Welcome to Simple Cooking with Heart. Over the next few weeks, we'll be getting comfortable in the kitchen, learning new skills and building upon them each week. This week, we're going to be focusing on basic knife skills by making quick fajitas and salsa. It's important to know how to use knife skills because whole produce is generally a lot cheaper than pre-cut produce. When you're cutting, you don't need a whole lot of fancy knives or supplies. You just need a cutting board, an 8-inch chef's knife, and a 4-inch paring knife. When you begin cooking, you want to make sure that all of your supplies are in front of you so that you're not digging around for things later. We're going to start off by cutting all of the produce that we need for our veggie fajitas, and then we're going to cut all of the produce that we need for our salsa. Then we'll cook our fajitas, and then we will mix our salsa, then plate it all together. Portobello mushroom, I'm cutting it into thicker slices because I want it to be a nice hearty bite. So I'm going to start off by ripping out this middle stem here. This is very hard to chew. And then I'm going to hold my knife, keep my fingers back away from the knife, and slice into my portobello mushroom. Trying to get thick, even slices. Once I'm done, I'm gonna make sure it's cut all the way through, and then place it in a container for later. Next, we're going to slice our bell pepper. For a family of 4, you would use the whole bell pepper, but since I'm only feeding 2 people, I'll be using half of it. I'm gonna just rip off that top section there so I can place it like so. Going to cut a slit less than halfway down the middle of my bell pepper, put my fingers where I've sliced, and then rip it in half. Hopefully, when you do this, you'll have one side that has all of the seeds. And you're gonna just pull that seed cluster out. Set that to the side. Next, you'll want to rip out this white membrane that also has seeds. I'm going to place my larger half to the side and use that for another recipe. And I'm going to cut up the other half for this recipe. Very similarly to how I cut the portobello mushroom, I'm just making even slices, making sure to keep my fingers pulled back from the knife's blade. While you're cutting, you want to make sure that your station is nice and clean, and that after you cut each ingredient, that you've cleaned up the mess from the previous ingredient. I'm going to place that in a separate container as well. Next, we'll be slicing our onion for our fajitas. In this recipe, we're using 2 different kinds of onions. The first one being just a regular white onion. When you're cutting round produce, it's often easiest to cut it in half so that you have a flat place to sit your produce on. So I'm going to do that by cutting my onion in half. And then placing it flat side down. Next, I'm going to cut about 1/2 inch from the top, cutting off this little stem piece here. Next, I'm going to peel off the first 1 or 2 papery layers. I think in this particular onion, it's 2. Now for this particular part of the recipe, this onion needs to be cut similarly to the bell peppers and the portobello mushrooms. So I'm going to be cutting back from the top. For the normal recipe, you could use 1 whole onion for 4 people. But once again, I'm cooking for 2 people, so I'll be using 1/4 to 1/2 of an onion. And I'm just slicing, not super thin, but not large chunks either, into the onion. Go a little bit more. All right, then I'll save this 1/2 and this 1/4 or so piece for another recipe. And I'll place this with my bell peppers. So we're finished slicing the produce for our fajitas, and we're going to be moving on to the vegetables that we need for our pico de gallo, or salsa. We're going to start off with 1/2 of a lemon, just sliced in 1/2, and we're going to juice that. Normally you'd use a lime, but I was unable to get limes at the grocery store. I'm just going to squeeze all the juice out. If you're using a lime, you would use a whole lime. Ooh. And set that to the side. Next, we're going to dice our onion. Similarly to how we cut our white onion earlier, we're going to cut it in 1/2 and then peel it. And then we're going to do something a little bit different to dice it. This one has started sprouting, so I'm glad that we're using it. Once again, peeling off that first layer to papery skin. Now for dicing our onion, instead of going ahead and slicing backwards towards the root, we're going to place our hand flat on top of the onion. We're going to place our hand flat on top of the onion. We're going to slice horizontally into the onion, moving backwards to the root. And we don't want to go all the way through the onion so that we cut through the root, because that root is going to keep our onion in place as we cut it in different directions. So I'm going to start off pretty low on the onion. I want to have my slices pretty close together, and that's going to make sure that my onion dices are very small. I'm going to carefully move up the onion, making sure to keep your fingers out of your cuts. Next, you're going to take the tip of your knife, and you're going to start right in the middle of your onion, and you don't want to go all the way down to the root, but right here at the top, and slice down. And then continue keeping pretty close to each cut so that your dice is nice and fine. With your other hand, you want to make sure that you are holding your onion together so that every piece is cut evenly. Now, this is a really fun part. Once you start slicing backwards, it all comes together really nicely. Small, even slices. and then we're going to place that in a container. Next, we're going to be mincing 1 clove of garlic. To do that, you're going to place your knife on top of your clove of garlic. You're going to make a fist, and then you're going to pound your knife once quickly and powerfully to help peel the garlic. Now, when you do that, it already starts to break a little bit, which will make it easier for mincing. Once you do that, you want to cut off the little bit of root that you have on the end. Next, you want to gently rock your knife back and forth against your garlic until it is very finely minced. Garlic is very sticky, so it is going to try to stick to your knife. So you're going to have to scoop it down off of your knife every now and again. We just want to keep mincing until it is very fine. Scooping it together when it separates, like so. Once it's fully minced, you'll place it in a small container for later. Now that we're finished chopping all of our produce, we're going to get started cooking. If we were going to be using chicken instead of the portobello mushrooms, you would do everything exactly the same. You would still brown the chicken the way that we're going to brown our mushrooms, and you would add all of the ingredients in exactly the same way. If you're using beans, you would skip the browning step and you would just add the beans when you add your peppers and onions. So now that my skillet is nice and hot, I'm going to add a very light drizzle of olive oil. If you have cooking spray, you can also use cooking spray. That's a great way to reduce some of the oil that you're using in your cooking. Very light drizzle. And I'm going to coat my pan. Since my oil looks a little bit shimmery, I'm going to add my portobello mushrooms and I'm going to brown them. Mushrooms take a little bit of time to brown, so I'm going to keep them there until they're brown on both sides and they are much smaller than how they are now. Now I'm going to let these sit and brown on both sides. Once your mushrooms are brown to your liking, you're going to add your peppers and your onions that you set aside for your fajitas. You're going to separate your onions so that they're nice, long strips. Next, you're going to add your soy sauce, your low sodium soy sauce, and your cumin. Cumin is generally used in Mexican and Indian food. It is a seed and it is very flavorful, allowing us to flavor our dish without adding more salt. And then we're going to add a bit of black pepper as well. And cover, turning down to medium low. We cover so that way the steam doesn't escape and allows the mushrooms and the peppers and the onions to all cook together. While we are waiting on our fajita filling to finish cooking, we're going to heat up our tortillas. When choosing tortillas, you want to make sure that if you're using flour, that they're whole wheat and that they have the lowest amount of saturated fat, or you're using corn tortillas. Today we're using corn tortillas, and I'm going to heat them up on the skillet. If you were cooking for 4 or more people, you could definitely just place these on a baking sheet and pop them in the oven for a couple minutes until warm. So I'm just placing them on my pan, waiting for them to get hot, and then flipping them over. It doesn't take very long at all once your pan is hot. There's one, and then I'll do 4 more. Now that our fajitas are almost done cooking, we're going to make our pico de gallo. I'm going to take our tomatoes that we cut earlier, add our onions, our red onions that we diced, our lemon or lime juice, garlic, a very small drizzle of olive oil, and our black pepper. If you like a little bit of heat in your salsa, you can definitely add some diced jalapeno as well. I just didn't happen to have any. Oh, I almost forgot. We need our green, our cilantro. I almost forgot to add the cilantro. Normally I would have cut this before when we were setting up our mise en place or everything in place. But now that I know, we'll give it a nice rough chop. Just moving back, chopping all of the cilantro. I don't separate the leaves from the stems because in cilantro, the stems aren't bitter and they aren't particularly hard and just continue to add flavor just like the leaves. And that helps us reduce waste. Give it a nice small chop. And then I'm going to add that to my pico de gallo. And then stir it all up to combine. All right, our fajita mix has been cooking on medium low to low for about 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm gonna go grab it off of the stove. I'm gonna get our tortillas, our low-fat sour cream, and our pico de gallo, and we will plate our fajitas. Plating our quick fajitas is super fast and super easy. We take a little bit of our filling, place it in our tortilla, making sure to get our onions and peppers. Oh, there's a little bit much in that one. We add a scoop of our pico de gallo. And a little dollop of a low-fat sour cream. That was a big dollop. If you wanted to and you had some low-fat cheese, you could add that. You could also add slices of avocado. Whatever you like on your fajitas, you can absolutely add. You don't have to sacrifice flavor when you're lowering your sodium intake.